Colonel Briggs snatched the radio from Donovan's hand and slammed it onto the table so hard the casing cracked. "You don't issue orders on my installation, Sergeant." His finger drove into her shoulder twice, backing her against the wall, while every officer in the room watched and said nothing. "You're here to look at rifles. That's it. That's all you are." He turned his back on her like she was furniture. Outside, his convoy was already rolling toward the trap she had tried to warn him about. And Claire Donovan stood perfectly still because the man who just shoved her had no idea he had touched one of America's most lethal covert operators. If this story moved you, subscribe to our channel, follow along until the very end, and drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story has traveled. The convoy left before sunrise. Sergeant First Class Cole Mercer stood outside the Tactical Operations Center and watched the vehicles disappear into the mountain dark, their headlights cutting thin yellow lines through a cold Colorado morning. He'd seen 100 convoys leave Raven Rock over the years. He knew the sound of them, the rhythm of engines and boot steps and radio chatter, and something about this morning felt wrong in a way he couldn't name yet. He told himself it was the altitude. He told himself it was the coffee. He told himself he was getting old. None of those things were true, and somewhere beneath his professional training, the part of him that had kept him alive through 11 years of real field work already knew it. He just didn't have enough information to listen to that part yet. He went back inside. Colonel Nathaniel Briggs was already at the map table when Mercer entered the TOC, his reading glasses on a styrofoam cup steaming near his elbow, his expression carrying the particular brand of focused irritation that soldiers who worked for him had learned to recognize. Briggs was not a man who wasted mornings. He was not a man who wasted anything. 25 years of command had compressed him into something precise and efficient and absolute. The kind of officer who believed that competence was visible, hierarchy was sacred, and experience was the only credential that actually mattered. "Mercer," he didn't look up from the map. "Your range is ready." "Yes, sir, evaluation begins at 0700. "Good." Briggs finally looked up. "Our guest from Washington should be out of your hair by noon if she cooperates." The guest from Washington. Mercer had received the notification the previous evening. A master sergeant named Claire Donovan, attached temporarily from some weapons evaluation office, whose full name took up most of the cover email. She was scheduled to observe the sniper component of Exercise Iron Summit, assess a batch of new scope mounts being tested on the installation's long-range platforms, and file a technical evaluation report. Routine, bureaucratic, the kind of thing the Army generated constantly, and nobody outside a small office in Virginia ever actually read. Mercer had not thought much about it. He did not expect her to walk into the briefing room at 5:58 in the morning, 2 minutes before it officially opened, carrying a black notebook and wearing a clean uniform with no unit patch and no decorations visible and no expression that gave anything away. She was smaller than he expected. Not small, she had the kind of balanced posture that people who spent serious time in physical training carried even when they weren't thinking about it. The automatic stillness of someone whose body had been professionally useful for a long time. But she wasn't imposing. She didn't fill a room the way Briggs filled a room. She didn't carry any of the aggressive physicality that senior NCOs sometimes projected as a form of preemptive authority. She sat down at the far end of the briefing table, opened her notebook, and waited. Briggs noticed her immediately and said nothing. The briefing began. It was a standard Iron Summit update: convoy routes, helicopter schedules, training sector assignments, weather overlays for the northern mountain corridors. Standard exercise management, the kind of briefing Briggs had given and received so many times that it ran almost automatically. Officers speaking from memory with numbers and coordinates flowing without hesitation. Donovan listened, she wrote in her notebook. And then 12 minutes into the briefing, when Captain Wesley Grant was reviewing the reconnaissance drone assignments for the northern sector, she said, "Stop." Not loudly, just clearly. The word cut through the presentation like a blade through paper because it was entirely unexpected, and every officer in the room turned toward the far end of the table where the woman from Washington's weapons evaluation office was holding her pen still above her notebook and looking at the drone display screen with an expression that had shifted from patient attention to something sharper and harder. Grant stopped mid-sentence. Briggs removed his reading glasses. "Sergeant," his voice carried the particular patience of a man who was not actually patient. "That drone feed," she pointed toward the screen, "grid reference November Golf 774. The timestamp on that data burst is wrong. Grant looked at the screen. The data burst was flagged as interference. Our communications section cleared it at 0412. She had read the incident log somewhere. Briggs didn't know when. I know, but the timestamp on the original transmission doesn't match the interference pattern. Interference produces degraded signal. That transmission was clean for 17 seconds before it dropped. The room was quiet. Mercer looked at the screen. He wasn't a communications specialist. He couldn't see what she was describing. Grant said carefully, a 17-second anomaly in a communications environment. This complex is well within expected parameters, Sergeant. We have several hundred personnel generating electronic signatures across 6 training sectors. That grid referenced is Sector Echo, she said. Nobody responded immediately. Sector Echo was the designation for the northern portion of Raven Rock's training territory, which included a decommissioned radar installation that had been officially disconnected from the military communications infrastructure several years earlier. It was used occasionally for training exercise as a navigational reference point, but it had no active electronic systems. Nothing there should have been transmitting anything. Sector Echo is inactive, Grant said. The signal came from there. Briggs set his glasses on the table. Sergeant Donovan, his voice had shifted now into something quieter and more deliberate. You've had access to our operational briefings for approximately 12 minutes. Our communications staff reviewed that anomaly for 3 hours this morning. Are you suggesting they missed something? She looked at him directly. I'm suggesting the exercise should be paused and the northern sector locked down until that transmission source is identified. The silence that followed was not brief. Mercer watched Briggs. He had worked under this man for 4 years. He knew how Briggs received challenges to his authority from junior officers who had earned the right through years of demonstrated competence. He knew how Briggs received them from inspectors and evaluators who arrived from outside with institutional backing. He had never seen Briggs receive one from a master sergeant attached for weapons evaluation who had been sitting at his briefing table for 12 minutes. Briggs said, "Hundreds of soldiers are already staged for this exercise. Helicopters are fueled. Convoys are moving. Canceling Iron Summit based on a 17-second signal anomaly that our communications professionals have already reviewed would be," he paused, choosing the word carefully, "disproportionate. Sir, I understand the operational disruption. I'm still recommending." "You're here to evaluate scope mounts," Briggs said. The patience was gone. It hadn't collapsed into anger. It had simply been set aside the way a man sets down something he no longer finds useful. "Sergeant Mercer will take you to the range. I'd appreciate it if you found what you're looking for there." She looked at him for a moment, then she closed her notebook. "Yes, sir." Mercer walked her out. They crossed the main compound in silence, past motor pools already humming with pre-exercise activity, past a line of soldiers checking equipment near the armory, past the communications relay tower that blinked its slow red light in the gray pre-dawn cold. When they were far enough from the TOC that his voice wouldn't carry, Mercer said, "For what it's worth, the communications team here is good. If they cleared the anomaly—" "I know they're good," she said. "That's not what bothered me." He waited. She didn't explain. He wasn't the kind of man who pressed people who didn't want to be pressed, and they walked the rest of the way to the range in silence, which was how Mercer came to understand that whatever this morning was going to become, it had already moved past the ordinary before the sun had fully cleared the mountains. The range at Raven Rock was a serious installation. Mercer had built most of it himself, meaning he had written the specifications, argued the budget through 3 rounds of reviews, supervised the contractors, and rejected 2 different scope configurations before accepting a third. He cared about it the way craftsmen care about things they have made well. His instructors were excellent. His ranges were accurate and well-maintained and calibrated precisely. Donovan walked through the equipment bay without comment. She picked up one of the precision rifles scheduled for evaluation, checked. The chamber looked through the scope and set it back down. "This one will shoot left," she said. One of Mercer's instructors, Staff Sergeant Pullman, looked up from the equipment log. "We zeroed that yesterday, Sergeant." "I know." She picked up the rifle again and looked at the mount. The base has microfracture stress on the rear lug contact. It's torquing slightly under the scope weight. It'll hold 0 in static conditions, then print left as it heats up. Pullman looked at Mercer. Mercer looked at the rifle. I took it and examined the mount himself using the light from the overhead fixture, tilting it the way she had tilted it. He almost didn't see it. It was incredibly small, a stress line barely wider than a human hair, almost invisible except at a particular angle under direct light. Get the optical comparator, he said to Pullman. Run it against the tolerance of spec. Pullman left. Mercer set the rifle down. How long have you been in weapons evaluation, he asked. Long enough, she said. That's not an answer. She looked at him steadily. No, it's not. He decided to let it go. Pullman returned 20 minutes later with the comparator reading. The mount was outside specification by a margin that would produce exactly the deviation she had described. Mercer replaced it himself. He didn't ask her how she knew. Not yet. They ran the equipment checks through mid-morning, and during that time Mercer observed something that he later tried to explain to people who hadn't been there and found he couldn't fully describe. It wasn't any single thing, it was a pattern. She handled every weapon with a kind of automatic efficiency that didn't come from technical training or specifications manuals. It came from repetition, from doing something so many times that your hands no longer had to think about it. Your hands just knew. Technical evaluators knew specifications. They did not know weapons the way she knew weapons. One of the younger instructors, a sergeant named Costa, challenged her directly after the morning checks. Costa was 26 and genuinely talented, and also young enough to believe that genuine talent entitled him to certainty. The manual says that dwell time on this system is 40 milliseconds, Costa said, holding a modified carbine that was part of a secondary evaluation package. But you adjusted the gas setting like you were cutting it to 35. 37, she said. The spec says 40. The spec was written for standard ammunition. That barrel's running 700 psi above the test condition pressure curve. At 40 milliseconds, you're going to get accelerated bolt carrier wear, and you'll see it in accuracy degradation after about 400 rounds. Costa stared at her. How do you know what the barrel's running? He asked. We haven't measured it. I know what the barrel's running because I know what that barrel sounds like. She said, get a pressure gauge, measure it, then tell me what you find. Costa measured it. It was 11 psi short of what she had said. He told her. She nodded. Adjust for it. He did. Mercer watched his instructor's expression travel from resistance to reluctant respect over the course of 4 minutes, and he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time on his range, the particular sensation of being in the presence of someone who knew more than the people around them, in a way that wasn't performance or bluster but simply fact. He asked her again at lunch when they sat at a field table with 2 cups of coffee from the TOC mess and the morning's equipment logs spread between them. Where did you really come from? She looked at him. The weapons evaluation office, she said. Claire. He almost never used first names with people he just met. He used it now because something about the situation felt like it had moved past ordinary professional formality. I've had evaluators come through here before. I've had good ones. None of them knew what you know about field-worn equipment. None of them identified a stress fracture by holding a rifle for 8 seconds. Where did you actually learn this? She was quiet for a moment. Places that aren't on the official training schedule, she said finally. That's what you told my instructor this morning. It's still true. He looked at her. She looked back at him with those gray-blue eyes that gave nothing away, and he understood that she was not going to tell him more than she wanted to tell him, and that pressing her would produce nothing except a wall. He had met enough people like that to know the difference between evasion and refusal. This was refusal and it was complete, so he dropped it. And then Specialist Jordan Blake appeared at the range entrance, moving faster than his usual pace, which Mercer had learned meant something had gone wrong in communications. Blake was 24 and conscientious and slightly anxious by nature, which made him excellent at catching problems and occasionally counterproductive when he reported them, because his delivery tended to compress 3-word sentences into 1-word sentences. Sergeant Mercer, he said, slightly out of breath. We have ghost signals. Mercer stood. Explain. Friendly ID transponders. IFF signals identification friend or foe. The system is reading American military vehicles in grid sectors where we don't have American military vehicles. 3 separate readings in the last 20 minutes. The first one I thought was a transponder calibration error. The second one I reported to communications. The third one, he stopped. The third one appeared in a sector that has no vehicles at all, No exercise units, nothing. It's showing a full convoy signature in an empty corridor. Mercer looked at Donovan. She had already stood up. "Someone is cloning your IFF signals," she said. Her voice was quiet, but her eyes were not quiet. "They're generating false friendly signatures to manipulate your tactical picture. Your command network thinks it's tracking American vehicles that don't exist." Blake looked at her, then at Mercer. "That would require military-grade signal intelligence equipment," she said. "Yes. Nobody could get that kind of equipment onto an active Army installation without—" "Blake," her voice cut through his sentence cleanly, "disconnect the tactical network from the northern sector feeds. Do it now." Blake looked at Mercer. Mercer was looking at Donovan, then he nodded at Blake. "Do it." Blake pulled his radio. Briggs's voice came through before Blake could transmit. "All stations, this is actual. Maintain all exercise network connections. I say again, maintain all connections. Any disruption to the exercise network requires my direct authorization." Blake froze. Mercer said into his own radio, "Colonel, we have irregular IFF signatures in multiple northern sectors. Sergeant Donovan believes I'm aware of the IFF irregularities," Briggs said. "Communications is investigating. The exercise continues." Donovan reached for the radio. Mercer hesitated, then handed it to her. "Colonel Briggs," she said, "whoever is generating these false signals has direct access to your exercise network's authentication protocols. That level of access means they can do more than confuse your tactical picture. They can redirect units. They can generate false navigation instructions. They can Sergeant," Briggs's voice was flat. "You are not an intelligence specialist. You are not a communications specialist. You are here to evaluate equipment. I would ask you not to step outside that lane." "Sir, that is not a request, Sergeant Donovan." She handed the radio back to Mercer. She didn't say anything. She picked up her black notebook and looked at the grid references Blake had written down. Mercer watched her trace a line between the false FF positions with her finger. She drew the line 3 times. Then she pulled out a separate map from her notebook, printed at a different scale than the exercise maps, showing terrain contours that Mercer recognized as the Northern Mountain Corridor, but with several annotations he didn't recognize and couldn't read because they were in a different format than any Army overlay he had ever seen. She traced the line a 4th time, and then her expression changed. It changed the way expressions change when someone connects the last piece of a puzzle they've been holding for hours. Not surprise exactly, more like the grim satisfaction of being right about something you were hoping you were wrong about. "Blake," she said, "those false IFF positions, give me the exact grid references." He read them off. She plotted them on her map. Then she plotted the drone anomaly from the morning briefing. Then she plotted Sector Echo. She laid her pen across the points. They formed a corridor. "They're not just confusing the picture," she said. "Look at where the false signatures are appearing. They're on the east approach. Every reading is pushing your tactical picture the way your commanders are reading troop positions toward the west. If your command network shows American assets concentrated on the western approach, every available reaction force gets committed to the west." Mercer looked at the map, "which leaves the east open," she said, "specifically the maintenance corridor behind Sector Echo. The radar station is decommissioned." She looked at him. "Is it?" she asked. The radio burst to life before he could answer. It was a controller from the northern training sector, and his voice was stripped of the professional calm that exercise controllers were supposed to maintain. All stations, this is November 6. We have live fire. I say again, live fire in the northern sector. Bravo 3 lead vehicle is hit. Engine block strike. This is not exercise fire. I say again, this is not exercise fire." The range went completely silent. Mercer stared at the radio. Blake had both hands pressed flat against the table like he needed something to hold on to. Donovan was already moving. She picked up her rifle case from the equipment rack, the case she had carried in when she arrived, which Mercer had assumed contained a weapons evaluation kit, and she moved toward the range exit with the smooth, unhurried speed of someone who had done this before, in conditions much worse than this, and knew that panic was the enemy of the next 30 seconds. "Mercer," she said without stopping, "I need you." He grabbed his own weapon. He followed her without asking why. He followed her because in 11 years of fieldwork, he had learned to recognize the difference between people who moved like they knew where they were going and people who moved like they hoped they were going the right direction. She knew exactly where she was going. They left the range and moved into the mountain terrain north of the main compound, moving through the tree line fast and low, Donovan setting the pace, and Mercer matching at his legs, burning slightly from the altitude change as they climbed the slope above the convoy route. Behind them, Mercer could hear the exercise network dissolving into genuine emergency communications. The controlled language of a training environment fracturing into the sharper, stripped language of real contact. Donovan moved along the ridge without slowing. He came up beside her. "You know where the firing positions are?" "I know where I'd put them," she said. She pressed against a rock face and raised her rifle, scanning the slope below through the scope. Mercer did the same from a different angle. "I have 3 positions," she said. "One high, left, one mid-right, one in the tree cluster at the bend." "How are they?" "They're not shooting to kill," she said. He processed that. "Say again." The lead vehicle took an engine block strike, 1 round. If the intent was casualties, they would have fired at the driver. "They were stopping the convoy, not destroying it." She kept scanning. "Watch the direction the vehicles are being pushed." He watched. The convoy, reacting to fire from the left side of the route, was maneuvering right, which in this terrain meant moving toward the lower canyon, approach to the eastern corridor she had traced on her map 20 minutes earlier. "They're not ambushing the convoy," she said. "They're steering it." He felt the cold understanding move through him like water. "Hurting them," he said, toward Echo. She reached for the radio and keyed Briggs's frequency. "Colonel Briggs, this is Donovan. The convoy is being directed by precision fire toward the eastern corridor. Do not advance, Bravo Company. Pull all units away from Sector Echo immediately." A pause. "Then Bravo Company is already moving, Sergeant. We are not surrendering the eastern sector to hostile fire." "Sir, the hostile fire is directional. They're driving your people somewhere." "I'm aware of what's happening on my installation, Sergeant Donovan." "Then you know that if Bravo Company reaches that corridor, Bravo Company will engage the hostile element and neutralize the threat. That is the doctrine, and that is the order." "Colonel, stand by for communications discipline, Sergeant." His voice had dropped to something absolutely final. "You do not have operational authority on this installation." "I do. Stay off this net unless you are reporting casualties." The radio fell silent. Mercer looked at her. Her jaw was set. Her eyes were moving across the slope below them, tracking the distant shapes of vehicles moving east. Soldiers fanning out into formations she could see better than he could from her position on the ridge. "Mercer," she said quietly. "Yeah. If you had to get something out of a hardened communications facility without anyone knowing you'd been there, how would you do it?" He thought about it. "I'd create a diversion big enough to pull every reaction element away from the facility's perimeter. Something that looked like a serious threat. Something that demanded an immediate tactical response." She nodded slowly. "And if the facility had an underground communications trunk," she said, "if it was connected to a classified network, if someone had pre-positioned equipment to access that network from a hardened junction point inside the facility, they'd need time," he said, "uninterrupted time with no security personnel within response distance." "How much time?" He thought about it. "Depends on what they're pulling. If they knew the architecture of the system in advance." He stopped, because the answer was already forming and he didn't like its shape. 20 minutes, maybe less. She looked east toward the convoy, now fully committed to the corridor below, toward the mountains beyond where the abandoned radar installation sat in its official state of disconnected, decommissioned silence. "We don't have 20 minutes, she said. Then she started moving again, faster this time. And somewhere in the operational silence between her last words and the sound of her boots on the rock, Mercer understood something he hadn't understood before. Something that had been accumulating since 5:58 in the morning when she walked into the briefing room and sat at the far end of the table with her black notebook. Something that had been growing through every weapon she touched and everything she knew that she shouldn't have known and every answer she hadn't given him. Whoever this woman was, she hadn't come to Raven Rock to evaluate rifles. She had come here for something else entirely, and whatever that was, it was happening right now. "Who are you?" he said. She didn't slow down. "Right now," she said, I'm the person trying to keep your soldiers from walking into the middle of a classified operation someone else planned for your installation. And this morning yesterday, when you came through the gate with your weapons evaluation and paperwork." She glanced back at him, just briefly, just long enough for him to see that what was in her eyes wasn't evasion and it wasn't performance. It was something that looked more than anything else like the particular weariness of someone who has carried a very serious responsibility alone for a very long time. "Someone who gave you a direct order no one listened to," she said, and she turned back to the mountain and kept moving. Mercer didn't ask any more questions. That was the thing he would remember later, when everything was over and people kept asking him what it had been like to work beside her during those 48 hours. He would tell them that the moment he stopped asking questions and started watching what she actually did was the moment he understood something that Colonel Briggs hadn't understood yet, that Claire Donovan didn't need anyone's permission to be the most capable person in any given situation. She just was. And the people around her either recognized it or they didn't, and the ones who didn't were the ones who ended up in trouble. They were moving fast through the mountain terrain above the convoy route when Mercer's radio came alive with a second transmission from November 6. "All stations, November 6. Second vehicle in Bravo 3 column is reporting navigation system conflict. GPS showing two different route instructions simultaneously. Lead elements are slowing, requesting guidance." Mercer keyed his radio. "November 6, hold position and await." Donovan put her hand on his arm. He stopped transmitting. She was listening to something he couldn't hear yet. Her head slightly angled, her eyes moving across the tree line to their east, with the focused patience of a person reading a language. Nobody else in the vicinity spoke. "Don't tell them to hold," she said quietly. "They need an instruction. If they hold in that corridor, they're a static target. Tell them to reverse, back the way they came. All vehicles." He looked at her. "Mercer," her voice didn't rise. It never rose. But it carried a weight that had nothing to do with volume. "Every second that convoy stays in that corridor, someone is watching them through optics and adjusting a plan accordingly. Tell them to move back." He keyed the radio. "November 6, this is Mercer. Instruct Bravo 3 to reverse course immediately. Full column back to the last waypoint. Acknowledge." A pause. Then, "Copy Sergeant Mercer, reversing now." Briggs's voice came through 40 seconds later, and it was not calm. "Mercer, who authorized that movement order, Bravo 3 was forward of the objective. Why are they pulling back?" Mercer looked at Donovan. She gave him nothing, no expression, no suggestion. She had already moved her attention back to the slope above them, scanning methodically through her optics. Colonel Mercer said, "We have reason to believe the forward corridor is being monitored." Sergeant Donovan identified. Sergeant Donovan does not have operational authority on this installation." The words came through the radio with the kind of absolute finality that 25 years of command could produce. "Restore Bravo 3 to their forward position." "Sir, I'd recommend." "That is not a recommendation, Sergeant Mercer. That is an order. Restore the position." Mercer closed his eyes for half a second. Then he opened them and looked at Donovan. She was watching him, not pushing him, not telling him what to do, just watching him with those steady gray-blue eyes that seemed to have already calculated 17 different versions of the next 30 minutes and settled on the one that produced the least catastrophic outcome. "If I don't restore the position," he said quietly, so only she could hear, "I am directly disobeying a lawful order from my commanding officer." "I know," she said. "That ends my career." "Possibly. You're asking me to trust someone I met this morning." "No," she said. "I'm asking you to trust what you've seen since this morning." "That's different." He held the radio for a long moment. Then he keyed it. "Colonel Briggs, Bravo 3 is holding at the reversal point pending route clearance. I take full responsibility for the delay. Mercer out." He released the transmit button. Briggs didn't respond. That silence was in its own way more alarming than anything he had said. Donovan had already turned back to the slope. "Third position," she said. "High ridge, 9 o'clock from the bend." They moved. "You can see them, I can see where they were." She adjusted her scope. "The displacement pattern is wrong for a repositioning sniper. They're consolidating, not spreading. They're pulling toward Echo." "Why would they pull back?" "Because Bravo 3 reversed." She lowered her rifle slightly. The convoy was the forcing element. They needed it in position before they could execute the next phase. When it reversed, it disrupted their timeline. Mercer processed this. So we bought time. We bought minutes, she said, not many. She moved again, faster, angling higher up the slope to gain elevation above the ridge she'd been watching. Mercer went with her, his legs working hard against the incline, his breathing adjusting to the altitude, changed with the automatic efficiency of a man who had spent his career in terrain like this. They reached the higher position, and Donovan dropped immediately into a low profile behind the rock shelf, settling her rifle with the practiced speed of someone who had done this in conditions far worse than a cold Colorado morning. Mercer came up beside her and scanned the terrain below. The convoy had stopped, vehicles angled across the narrow route, soldiers dismounting and taking cover along the embankment. From this elevation, he could see the whole picture, the stop column, the empty eastern corridor ahead of them, the dark tree line where the false IFF signatures had been generated, and beyond that, barely visible through the mountain haze, the angular outline of the abandoned radar installation. Sector Echo. Tell me what I'm looking at, he said. You're looking at a diversion, she said. The ambush, the false signals, the navigation confusion, none of it is the mission. It's the wrapper around the mission. Something is happening inside that facility right now, and everything we've been dealing with for the last 2 hours exists to make sure nobody has the attention or the personnel to notice. What's inside the facility? She was quiet for 3 seconds. In the context of everything happening around them, 3 seconds was a very long time. Something that shouldn't be there, she said. It was not a complete answer. He knew it was not a complete answer. And he also knew with the bone-deep instinct of a man who had spent a career reading people in high-stress situations that it was the most complete answer she was going to give him right now. Not because she was being evasive for the sake of it, but because some of what she knew was not hers to share, and she was drawing that line with precision, the way she drew every line clearly without apology, without explanation. He respected it, even as it frustrated him. Okay, he said, what do you need? She looked at something shifted in her expression then. Not gratitude exactly, something quieter than gratitude. The recognition that a person who didn't have to be here had just decided to be here anyway. I need eyes on the maintenance approach to Echo, she said. The northeast corner, there's a service road that would have been used during the facility's operational years. It won't show on the current exercise maps because it predates the installation's current configuration. How do you know about a service road that predates the current configuration? Because I read the facility's original construction documentation, she said. Before I came here. He stared at her. You read the construction documentation for a decommissioned radar installation before arriving for a weapons evaluation exercise? Yes. Why? She looked at him steadily. Because I was told to. The radio crackled. It was Blake, not Briggs, and his voice carried the specific frequency of controlled panic, the sound of someone who had found something they didn't want to have found. Sergeant Mercer, I need you on a secure channel now. Mercer switched frequencies. Go ahead, Blake. The ghost IFF signals are multiplying. We had 3 anomalous readings an hour ago. We have 11 now. But that's not, Sergeant. The signals are inside the wire. 2 of them are inside the main compound perimeter. Mercer felt the cold hit him somewhere deeper than the mountain air could reach. Inside the perimeter. Yes, sir. The system is showing 2 American military vehicles in the vehicle maintenance bay that our physical security confirms are not there. Someone is projecting friendly signatures inside our own base. Donovan had heard. Her jaw tightened. Blake, she said, leaning toward Mercer's radio. Pull up the historical access logs for the communications infrastructure node in the Eastern Equipment Block. I need to know who accessed that node in the last 72 hours. Blake's keyboard sounds came through the transmission. That requires I need authorization to pull infrastructure logs at that level, Sergeant. Mercer authorizes it, she said, looking at Mercer. He nodded at the radio. Sergeant Mercer authorizes, Blake confirmed, and went back to his keyboard. The pause that followed lasted long enough that Mercer checked the terrain below twice, and Donovan ran a slow scan across the eastern ridgeline and back. Then Blake said, Sergeant Mercer. His voice had changed. The controlled panic was gone. What replaced it was something quieter and more serious, the voice of someone who had just found something that was going to change the shape of the morning in ways he was still processing. The communications node was accessed 11 days ago by an authorized user. The log shows a 47-minute maintenance session. Equipment diagnostic standard entry. A pause. The user ID on the access log belongs to Captain Wesley Grant. Mercer didn't move. Donovan didn't move. Below them, the convoy sat motionless in the corridor, soldiers waiting for orders that kept shifting a situation that should have been a controlled training exercise, now stretched across 3 frequencies of genuine emergency communication. Blake, Donovan said carefully, does the maintenance log include any equipment modifications? The log shows standard diagnostic. But, Blake stopped. But what? The timestamp on the diagnostic completion is 47 minutes after entry. The diagnostic tool we use for that node runs in 12 minutes maximum. I've run it myself. It takes 12 minutes. 47 minutes. 35 minutes unaccounted for. 35 minutes inside the communications infrastructure node day with an authorized access credential and no one watching. Mercer said nothing. Donovan said nothing. They looked at each other across the rock shelf with the wind moving between them and the convoy sitting in the corridor below, and the mountain holding everything in its cold, indifferent silence. Blake, she said finally, don't share that log with anyone. Not communications staff, not the TOC, not anyone. Do you understand? Yes, Sergeant. Lock your terminal and stay where you are. Yes, Sergeant. She clicked off. Mercer was already running the calculation. Wesley Grant, operations officer, 4 years at Raven Rock. Briggs's most trusted subordinate, the man who stood beside the colonel at every briefing, who coordinated movements and managed communications and recommended tactical dispositions, and had for the entirety of this morning been standing at the map table with a perfect view of every decision being made. He's been feeding them, Mercer said. Real-time operational data, she said. Convoy positions, reaction force locations, command frequencies, everything. For how long? At minimum, the 47 minutes in that node 11 days ago. Realistically, she paused. Long enough to know this installation's response patterns, well enough to design an operation around its gaps. Mercer felt something move through him that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite fear. It was the particular sensation of discovering that something you had trusted completely had been corrupted somewhere in its foundation, and that the corruption had been there long enough to matter. He had served alongside Grant at a function 3 weeks ago. They had talked about the upcoming exercise, the training schedule, personnel rotations. Grant had shaken his hand. He thought about that handshake now and felt something he couldn't fully name. We need to tell Briggs, he said. We need to tell him carefully, she said. Grant is standing next to him right now. That landed. If Grant had been Briggs's position for 4 years, he would know exactly how to manage the colonel's reactions. He would know which arguments to make. He would know how to redirect suspicion. He would know how to make a woman from Washington's Weapons Evaluation Office sound like the least credible source of intelligence in the room. If we tip Grant that we know, Mercer said slowly, he will move before we can contain him. Yes, but if we don't tell Briggs, the operation continues with a compromised operations officer standing at the command table. Yes, there is no good option here. There's one, she said. She reached into the inside pocket of her jacket. Mercer watched her hand emerge with a small device he didn't recognize. Flat matte black, roughly the size and shape of a deck of cards, but thinner with a single recessed button on one face. What is that? He asked. She looked at it for a moment. Insurance, she said. She didn't explain further, and he didn't push her, because at this precise moment, Briggs's voice came through the radio again, and the tone of it was different from anything Mercer had heard from him all morning. The command precision was still there, but something underneath it had cracked slightly, the way ice cracks before it gives way entirely. All stations, this is actual. We have a soldier down in the northern corridor. I say again, 1 casualty, non-fatal northern corridor. Medics are responding. All reaction forces are ordered forward to the Echo approach immediately. A pause that felt deliberate. All units full advance, now. Donovan was on her feet before Briggs finished the transmission. He's committing everything, she said. Someone is hurt. Someone may be hurt, or the casualty report is false, generated by the same people who generated 11 IFF phantom signals this morning. She was already moving along the ridge. Either way, if Briggs sends his reaction forces forward, there will be no security element left between the main compound and Sector Echo. Mercer ran after her. You think Grant manufactured the casualty report? I think Grant has been in that TOC all morning watching Briggs refuse to commit forward. I think a casualty report is exactly the kind of information that would make a commander of Briggs's temperament stop waiting and move everything he has. If there's actually a soldier down, then the medics will handle it. Her voice was not cold, but it was very clear. Mercer, the medics are already moving. What isn't moving is anyone who can stop what's about to happen inside that facility. We are the only people who know enough to stop it. That has to be the priority. And he ran the geometry of it as they moved and found with a sick recognition that she was right. He hated that she was right. He hated the calculation that put operational priority above a potential casualty. Even knowing it was the correct calculation, even knowing that the medics were already responding and his presence at that scene would change nothing. He kept moving. They came around the north face of the ridge and the terrain opened up below them. The maintenance road she had mentioned, barely visible under years of disuse, a pale scar running northeast through the scrub toward the rear corner of the facility. And on that road moving fast were two figures in civilian gear. Donovan dropped to a knee. Mercer dropped beside her. Through his optics, he could make out shapes, movement equipment, cases being carried between the two figures. Military issue cases, the kind designed for electronic hardware. They're extracting, he said. No, she watched them for 3 seconds. They're delivering. Those cases are going in, not out. Whatever they're transferring to that communications trunk, they need hardware on site to complete it. How long does that give us? To set up equipment of that complexity inside a hardened facility. She ran the math visibly, her expression moving through calculations he couldn't follow. 20 minutes from the moment they enter, maybe 25. She pulled out her radio and switched to a frequency Mercer didn't recognize, a channel not on the Raven Rock exercise network, not on any standard Army communications architecture he had ever been assigned. She spoke into it, not loudly, not urgently, with the flat, precise cadence of someone delivering a prepared report. Sentinel-7 actual, authentication Donovan Delta 4, requesting channel confirmation Gray 6, static, then a voice Mercer had never heard coming from somewhere that was very clearly not Colorado. Gray 6 confirmed. Go ahead, 7. Operation is active. Target facility engaged. I need a command channel to Raven Rock TOC authorization override level Black 1, direct to installation, Commander. Confirm available. A pause. Confirming, standby for routing. Mercer stared at her. She looked back at him, and for the first time since 5:58 that morning, she let him see something she had been keeping very carefully contained. Not fear, nothing like fear, but the specific weight of a person who has been carrying the entire shape of a crisis alone and is reaching the moment where carrying it alone is no longer an option. Mercer, she said, yeah, what I'm about to do is going to change everything Briggs thinks he knows about this situation. About me, about this morning. She held his eyes. I need you to stay in position regardless of what you hear over the radio. Can you do that? Depends on what I hear. She almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. Fair answer, she said. Then the radio came alive again, and the voice on it now was not from an unknown frequency. It was Major General Rebecca Shaw, and she wasn't calling Mercer. She was calling Colonel Nathaniel Briggs directly on his command frequency, and Mercer's radio was close enough to Donovan's that he caught the transmission clearly, every word of it, in the particular tone of a 2-star general who does not repeat herself and does not explain herself more than once. Colonel Briggs, this is Major General Shaw, Special Operations Command. You will halt all forward movement immediately. You will secure your TOC, and you will listen very carefully to what I am about to tell you about the woman you pushed out of your briefing room this morning. Below them, the two figures with equipment cases had reached the facility entrance. The clock was running, and in the Tactical Operations Center at Raven Rock, Nathaniel Briggs was about to discover exactly who he had dismissed and exactly what it had cost him and exactly how little time remained to make it right. Donovan watched the facility entrance close behind the two figures. She checked her watch. 20 minutes, she said quietly. Then she started running. She ran like someone who had done it under fire before. Not recklessly, not with the desperate scramble of a person reacting to a crisis. She ran with the kind of controlled violence that comes from years of moving through bad situations and learning that panic costs you exactly the seconds you cannot afford to lose. Mercer kept pace beside her, his breathing steady, his eyes moving across the terrain, the way her eyes moved, not looking at one thing, looking at everything, the way soldiers who have survived long enough to develop real instincts always move. Behind them on the radio, Major General Shaw was still talking to Briggs. Mercer caught fragments of it as they ran the transmission, breaking and reassembling across the mountain interference. Shaw's voice, flat, authoritative, the kind of voice that did not perform authority because it did not need to. Colonel Briggs, the individual you removed from your briefing room this morning, holds a field authority designation that supersedes your installation command for the duration of this operation. I need you to understand that clearly before we go any further. A pause, then Briggs's voice and something in it had shifted. The absolute certainty was still there, but underneath it, something was beginning to crack. General Shaw, with respect, my orders regarding this exercise. Your orders do not cover what is currently happening inside Sector Echo. Shaw cut through him the way a blade cuts through resistance, not with force, but with precision. Halt your forward elements, secure your TOC and listen. Donovan and Mercer hit the maintenance road at the northeast corner of the facility, and she dropped her pace immediately, moving low and fast along the edge of the scrub, using the terrain the way she used everything, not fighting it, working with it. Mercer came up beside her. 2 minutes since they entered, he said quietly. 18 left, she said. If your estimate is right, it's right. He believed her. At this point, he had no rational reason not to believe her, and several hours' worth of evidence suggesting he should. She stopped at a concrete abutment along the facility's rear wall. Old construction, the kind of poured concrete that predated modern building standards and had developed the particular weathered texture of something that had been holding against Colorado winters for 40 years. She pressed her back against it and looked at the access point above them, a ventilation housing that would have been standard installation for a facility of this type and age. Service corridor, she said quietly. It runs the length of the eastern wing and connects to the main communications chamber. The original blueprints show it as maintenance access for the antenna cabling systems. She looked at him. It hasn't been used operationally in at least 15 years, but the physical structure is intact. I confirmed it from the survey photographs in the facility records. You read the survey photographs, he said. I told you I prepared. You prepared like someone who knew this was going to happen. She looked at him directly. I prepared like someone who was sent here because we had reason to believe it might happen. There's a difference. He held her gaze for a moment. Then he nodded once, the compact nod of a man who has decided to stop asking questions about the past and focus entirely on the next 60 seconds. How do we access the corridor? He asked. She pointed upward. He looked at the ventilation housing and felt the particular sensation of a man who has spent his career operating in difficult conditions, being asked to do something that is going to be physically unpleasant. Of course, he said. They went up. It was harder than it looked, which was saying something, because it looked genuinely difficult. The concrete was slick from overnight moisture, and the housing was set flush against the wall with minimal grip surface. Donovan went first, moving with an efficiency that made it look more manageable than it was, and Mercer followed with the determined competence of a man who was not going to be shown up on his own installation. They got through. The service corridor was dark and close, and smelled of old electrical insulation and decades of disuse. They moved through it single file, Donovan leading both of them, navigating by the pale illumination of a single red filtered light she produced from her vest pocket. Low signature, minimal light, spread, the kind of tool that suggested extensive experience, operating in spaces where light discipline was not optional. Mercer's radio crackled once very quietly, and he muted it before it could broadcast into the corridor. They moved for what felt like 4 minutes and was probably 2, and then Donovan stopped. She held up a fist. He stopped immediately. Through the thin partition wall beside them came the sound of voices. 2 of them, male, speaking in clipped, precise exchanges that had the character of people working against a deadline. Not panic, but compressed, every word. Functional, nothing wasted. Donovan pressed against the partition and listened. Mercer pressed beside her. The words were technical: data transfer rates, authentication handshakes, network architecture, terminology that Mercer recognized as communications infrastructure language without being able to parse its specific meaning. But one phrase came through clearly enough that even without a communications background, he understood its significance. Oracle trunk is open. Transfer initialized. Donovan's eyes closed for exactly 1 second. When they opened, her expression had settled into something very still and very resolved. She looked at Mercer and held up 3 fingers. He looked back at her and shook his head once very slightly, then held up 2 fingers of his own and pointed at her. She understood. 2 was better than 3. She went. He covered. She moved to the corridor junction and turned the corner, and Mercer held his position with his weapon up and his breathing controlled, in the particular cold clarity of a man who has been in enough real situations to know that the next 90 seconds would determine everything. What happened in those 90 seconds would take him a long time to fully describe to the review board that asked him about it 6 weeks later. What he heard was efficient, indecisive, and completely without theatrical violence. 2 impacts, 1 voice beginning a sentence that didn't finish, the sounds of equipment being moved, and then silence. Then Donovan's voice level from around the corner. Clear, he came around. Both figures were on the ground, secured with zip ties she had produced from somewhere in her vest with the casual efficiency of someone for whom restraining hostile personnel was a practiced skill. Neither was seriously injured. Both were conscious and very quiet, wearing the particular expression of people who have just been efficiently handled by someone operating at a level they had not anticipated. One of them, the older one, mid-40s, with the lean, weathered look of a man who had spent significant time in field conditions, looked up at her with an expression that mixed professional defeat with genuine assessment. "Donovan," he said. It was not a question. She looked at him. "Vale, Adrian Vale." Mercer looked from her to the man on the ground and understood several things simultaneously: that this was not the first time these 2 people had been aware of each other's existence, that whatever Vale represented went significantly beyond a communications intrusion at a mountain training installation, and that Donovan had known exactly who she was looking for from the moment she arrived at Raven Rock. "The transfer is running," Vale said. He said it without urgency, almost conversationally, the way a man states a fact he believes is now beyond dispute. "You're too late." Donovan looked at the equipment. Screens active, transfer progress, visible numbers, climbing steadily. "How much has transferred?" she said. Vale smiled. It was a thin, informed smile, the smile of a man who had planned for this exact moment. "Enough." She stepped to the equipment console without another word to him and began working the interface with both hands, moving through screens at a speed that confirmed she understood the system she was looking at, not learning it in the moment but recognizing it, which meant she had seen it before, or something close enough to it that the architecture was familiar. Mercer kept his weapon on Vale. Vale watched Donovan work with the calm, evaluating attention of someone who was waiting to see whether his backup plan was going to become necessary. His radio crackled. Mercer moved to it immediately. Vale tensed. The voice on Vale's radio was not from inside the facility, it was from outside. "Package is clear. Extraction in 8 minutes." "Do you copy?" Donovan didn't look up from the console. "Mercer, already on it." He keyed his own radio, switching to the channel he had heard her use earlier. He didn't know if it would work. He tried anyway. "Gray 6, this is Mercer. I'm inside the facility with Donovan. We have Vale secured, but there's an extraction team outside. I need Briggs to move a containment element to the northeast perimeter. Now." A 3-second pause. Then Shaw's voice, and she was not talking to Mercer. She was talking to Briggs, and the transmission was open enough that both men could hear it. "Colonel Briggs, northeast perimeter of Echo. Containment element. Move them." Briggs's response came 4 seconds later, and every trace of the resistance that had defined his morning was gone from his voice. What remained was the stripped-down operational competence of a commander who has received enough information to understand what is actually happening and has made the internal shift from defending his authority to using it. "Northeast perimeter, all available MPs. Move now." A pause. "And somebody tell me what else she needs." Donovan heard it. She didn't react visibly. She kept working the console. "I need it stopped," she said to no one specifically and everyone simultaneously. "The transfer, I need it stopped before it reaches the external relay." Mercer looked at the screen over her shoulder. The transfer counter was at 63%. How long to the external relay? At this rate, she ran the calculation without pausing her hands on the console. 4 minutes. "Can you stop it from here?" The authentication for the transfer was initialized on Vale's hardware. She moved to the second piece of equipment and opened it. He built in a dead man's switch. If I interrupt the transfer from the console, it automatically completes to the backup relay. There's a backup relay. There's always a backup relay with Vale. She said it without heat, with the flat recognition of someone who had studied this man's operational methodology long enough to know his patterns. He doesn't build single points of failure into his systems. Vale had been listening. "You're good," he said from the floor, "but you're not fast enough." Donovan didn't answer him. She stood up from the equipment console and looked at Mercer. And in her expression, he saw the thing he had been seeing all morning, but hadn't had language for until this moment, the particular clarity of a person who has moved past the point of hoping a situation will resolve cleanly and has arrived at the place where they are simply going to resolve it themselves. "The external relay," she said. "Where is it?" "I don't know. It has to be line of sight to the facility antenna. High ground northeast quadrant in 2 kilometers. She was already pulling her own equipment. "It's a small transmitter, mast-mounted, probably disguised as natural debris or attached to existing infrastructure." Mercer ran the terrain in his mind. The northeast quadrant from the facility. High ground, line of sight. "The fire observation tower," he said. "Old Forest Service structure, about 800 meters from the northeast wall. It's been decommissioned for years, but the structure is still standing." She looked at him with the particular expression of a person who has just received exactly the piece of information they needed at exactly the moment they needed it. "That's it," she said. Then she reached for her rifle case. Vale's expression changed. For the first time since Mercer had seen him, the professional calm cracked just slightly, just at the edges, and what showed underneath it was not fear, but the sharp involuntary attention of someone who has just understood that the situation has moved outside the parameters of his planning. "You can't shoot at it from here," Vale said. "You don't have a line of sight from inside the facility." "I know," she said. She looked at Mercer. "How long to get back to the ridge we came off?" "Running 6 minutes." She checked the transfer counter. 69%. "Give me 5, she said. She moved. Mercer had a decision to make in the next 4 seconds, and he made it the way he had made decisions all morning, by watching her and trusting the accumulated evidence of everything she had demonstrated since the moment she walked into Briggs's briefing room. He keyed his radio. "Blake." "Here, Sergeant." "The fire observation tower northeast of Echo. I need an exact grid reference in the next 30 seconds. Blake was already moving. "Pulling it now." Mercer followed Donovan back into the service corridor. Behind him, Vale said nothing. Vale was running his own calculations, and whatever those calculations produced, it was enough to keep him quiet and still on the floor of the communications chamber, while the transfer counter climbed towards 70%. They moved through the corridor faster than they'd come in the confined space, demanding a bent-low run that was harder on the back than the legs. And Mercer's world compressed into the red-filtered light ahead of him, and the sound of Donovan's boots on the concrete floor, and his own breathing, and the radio on his vest waiting for Blake's grid reference. It came as they reached the exterior junction. "Grid reference for the tower, Sergeant. November Echo 883-2907. Donovan had already heard it. She processed it without breaking stride, and as they came back out into the cold mountain air, she was already orienting herself, reading the terrain with the automatic precision of someone for whom geography was a language as natural as English. She looked northeast. The tower was not visible from their current position. The ridgeline they had come off earlier was the intermediate high ground. If she could get back to that elevation, she would have the angle. 6 minutes, Mercer confirmed. 5, she said again, and she started up the slope. This was different from the controlled movement of earlier in the morning. This was a run, an actual run, pushing against the mountain grade with everything available, and Mercer went with her stride for stride and felt his lungs work against the altitude in a way that reminded him that 41 was not 25. But she didn't slow, and so neither did he. His radio came alive halfway up the slope, and the voice on it stopped him cold enough that he almost broke stride. It was Briggs. But the Briggs on the radio was not the man who had cracked the briefing folder across the table and told a master sergeant that she didn't issue orders on his installation. The voice was the same voice, the same cadence and timbre, but everything it had been carrying all morning: the territorial authority, the defensive certainty, the absolute refusal to accommodate information that challenged his established picture. All of it was gone. What remained was command, pure and stripped down and completely focused. Mercer, status. Climbing to firing position northeast ridge. Donovan is attempting a relay intercept. Transfers at Tisha. He looked at Donovan. 74, she said without turning. 74%, Colonel. We have maybe 3 minutes before it reaches the backup relay. A pause, then what does she need from me? Mercer looked at her, back at the set of her shoulders as she climbed at the rifle case, moving with her stride. Keep the MPs on the perimeter, he said, and stay off this frequency. Another pause. Shorter. Copy, Briggs said, and the radio went silent. They reached the ridge. Donovan didn't stop at the top. She moved 3 steps past the crest, dropped to prone, had the rifle out of the case in a motion that was too fast to fully follow, and had it settled against her shoulder before Mercer had fully registered she'd stopped moving. He dropped beside her and looked through his own optics northeast. The tower was visible from here. Barely. 800 meters, maybe slightly more, through mountain air that was moving, not constant, not predictable, shifting between the ridgelines in the particular inconsistent pattern that Colorado terrain produced when the morning temperature differential started resolving. He found the tower in his optics, and on it, attached to the upper platform railing with what looked like improvised mounting hardware, he found what she was looking for. A relay transmitter. Small, military-grade compact. The kind of equipment that would pass as debris or discarded hardware to anyone who wasn't specifically looking for it. I have it, he said. I have it, she said at the same moment. Then she said, what's the wind doing? He checked his equipment. Variable, 7 to 11 knots, shifting northeast, gusting to 14 at intervals. Interval pattern. He watched his wind indicator for 15 seconds. Approximately 12 seconds between gusts. She was already in the scope, her breathing settling into the particular rhythm that snipers develop, not shallow, not deep, but suspended at the balance point between intake and exhale, the body becoming a stable platform by becoming temporarily something other than fully alive. Mercer checked his watch. Transfer was at 74% 11 seconds ago. At the rate it had been climbing, it was at 77 now. He said nothing. She already knew. Below them, he heard Briggs's containment element moving toward the perimeter boots on gravel radio. Clicks, the controlled sounds of soldiers repositioning with purpose. The MPs would reach the northeast perimeter in time to cover the extraction point Vale's radio had referenced. If the extraction team was still there, if they hadn't already received enough of the transfer to consider the operation successful. That was the variable none of them could control from this position. That was the thing riding entirely on the shot Donovan was about to take. Vale's voice came through Mercer's radio unexpectedly, the radio he'd taken from inside the facility still tuned to Vale's operational frequency. 79%, Vale said. I was reading the transfer counter from inside the facility. He was feeding information to his extraction team, and he was telling Donovan that her time was running out. Mercer looked at her. She was absolutely still. The wind moved across the ridge in an uneven pulse. He tracked it. 12 seconds between the last 2 gusts. The next one would come in approximately 5 seconds. After it passed, there would be a brief window, maybe 4 seconds, of relative stability before the next variation. Wind's about to shift, he said. I know, she said. He counted silently. The gust came. He felt it move across his face and hands and recede. 4 seconds. 3, 2. She fired. The sound of the shot moved across the mountain and came back off the far ridgeline as an echo, and in the scope, Mercer watched the relay transmitter on the tower platform take the round and come apart, not explosively, not dramatically, but with the precise mechanical finality of a component that has ceased to exist as a functional object. The transmission died. He knew it before he heard anything, before any confirmation came over any radio. He knew it the way you know certain things in the field, by the silence that follows them, which is different from other silences in a way that is very difficult to describe to people who haven't lived it. Then Blake's voice over the radio, breathless. Transfer terminated. System showing connection failure on the external relay. The transfer stopped at a pause while he read the number, 81%. Mercer let out a breath. Donovan held still for 1 more second. Then she lifted her eye from the scope and looked out at the mountain with an expression that was not satisfaction and not relief and not the particular theatrical triumph that a lesser person might have allowed themselves in that moment. It was something quieter than all of those things. It was the expression of someone who had done exactly what they came here to do and was already thinking about the 19% that had transmitted before the connection severed and what would need to happen next to contain whatever had reached the other end. Mercer's radio came alive again. Briggs's voice. Perimeter is contained. Extraction team located and secured Northeast Access Road. 2 individuals in custody. A pause. Sergeant Donovan, Vale is still inside the facility. I know, she said. She was already packing the rifle. My MPs are positioned at every exit. Good. Another pause, longer than the previous ones. When Briggs spoke again, his voice carried something Mercer had never heard from him before. Not weakness, nothing like weakness, but the particular weight of a man who is about to say something that costs him something real. I need to understand, Briggs said. The full operation, from the beginning. Donovan looked at Mercer. Mercer looked at her. You want to tell him, Mercer said. She picked up her rifle case. I'll tell him in person, she said. He's earned that. She started back down the slope toward the facility, and Mercer following her for the 4th time that morning, without being asked or ordered or given any particular reason, beyond the accumulated evidence of the past several hours, thought that the most remarkable thing about Claire Donovan was not the shot she had just made. Any exceptional sniper with the right training and enough field time could make a shot like that under the right conditions. The most remarkable thing was that she had known from the moment she plotted that first 17-second drone anomaly in the pre-dawn briefing room exactly what the shot was going to need to be. She had carried the entire operation inside her, alone, without flinching, without revealing more than was necessary, without compromising the mission to ease anyone else's discomfort or satisfy anyone else's need for reassurance. And she had done it while being physically shoved out of a room, while being told she didn't belong, while being reduced repeatedly and publicly to the least threatening description of herself available. Weapons technician, rifle evaluator, a woman who had come to look at scope mounts and should go back to looking at scope mounts. She had absorbed all of it, and then she had done her job anyway. They reached the facility entrance, and the MPs at the door stood aside without being asked their attention on her, carrying the particular quality of soldiers who have received enough radio traffic in the last 20 minutes to understand that the woman walking toward them is not who the morning's paperwork said she was. Inside, Vale was still on the floor. He looked up when she entered. His professional calm had fully reassembled itself. The brief crack from earlier had closed over, and what looked back at her now was the composed, evaluating intelligence of a man who knew he was caught and was already running the calculations for whatever came next. 81%, he said. 19 short, she said. Enough to be useful. Not enough to be decisive, she said, and you know that. He looked at her for a long moment. You were better than the profile suggested, he said finally. The profile was incomplete. Clearly, he tilted his head slightly, the gesture of a man who is filing information even in custody. The shot on the relay. What was your hold? She looked into him. I'm not going to tell you that, she said. He almost smiled. No, I suppose you're not. Mercer watched this exchange with the particular fascination of someone witnessing a conversation happening in a language he technically understood, but was operating at a register. He had never personally inhabited the flat, stripped down communication of 2 people from the same professional world who had spent years on opposite sides of the same ledger and were now standing in the same room for the first time. His radio crackled. Briggs. Sergeant Donovan, I'm at the main entrance of Echo. Request permission to enter. The phrasing stopped everyone in the room. Request permission. Nathaniel Briggs, Colonel, United States Army, commanding officer of Raven Rock Training Complex, was asking permission to enter a building on his own installation. Because he understood now who was actually running this operation. Donovan looked at Mercer. Mercer said nothing. She keyed the radio. Come in, Colonel, she said. And 40 seconds later, the man who had shoved her out of his briefing room that morning walked through the door of the facility and saw what the morning had actually been, and stood in the doorway looking at Vale on the floor and the disabled equipment and the 2 MPs and Claire Donovan standing in the middle of all of it with her rifle case over her shoulder and no expression on her face that asked for anything from him at all. He looked at her for a long time. Then he said very quietly, I owe you an explanation. You owe me nothing, she said, but we need to talk about Grant. Briggs's expression shifted. Grant left the TOC 12 minutes ago, he said. During the transmission from General Shaw, he said he was going to coordinate the Northern Sector Reaction Force. A pause. He didn't go to the Northern Sector. The silence that followed that statement was the loudest thing in the room. Donovan set her rifle case down. "Where is he?" she said. Briggs met her eyes. "We don't know," he said. The three words landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. "We don't know." Donovan absorbed them without visible reaction, which was its own kind of reaction, the kind that only comes from a person who has spent years training themselves not to let the worst possible information change the quality of their next decision. She stood very still for exactly 2 seconds. Then she moved to the communications equipment. Vale's team had brought in the hardware that was still powered, still connected to the facility's underground trunk, and she pulled up the installation's internal tracking system with the particular speed of someone who knew exactly what she was looking for and exactly where to find it. Mercer watched her hands on the keyboard. Briggs watched her face. Vale watched the room from the floor with the contained, evaluating attention of a man who understood that the situation had just produced a variable even he hadn't fully anticipated. "Grant's vehicle," she said. "Is it tagged?" "All officer vehicles are tagged," Briggs said immediately. He was already moving toward the screen. Blue Force tracker updated every 4 minutes. "Pull it." He did. The screen populated with vehicle positions across the installation. Most were clustered in the operational areas, the northern sector, the main compound, the MP positions. Briggs had repositioned in the last 20 minutes. One vehicle identifier sat apart from all the others, and when Briggs saw where it was, something moved across his face that Mercer had never seen there before. Not anger, shock. "That's the south gate," Briggs said. "He's at the south gate." "Is the gate manned?" Donovan asked. "2 soldiers on static post. The gate requires command authorization to open for officer-grade vehicles." He was already reaching for his radio. "He can't go through without—" His radio came alive before he could transmit. The voice on it was young and tight and making a visible effort to remain professional. "Colonel Briggs, this is South Gate Post. Captain Grant is here requesting emergency exit authorization. He says he has your direct approval, sir. We're requesting confirmation." Everyone in the room heard it. Briggs looked at Donovan. She was already shaking her head. He keyed the radio. "South Gate, this is Briggs. Do not open that gate. Detain Captain Grant and hold him at the post. Use whatever force is necessary. Do you copy?" A pause. "Then copy, Colonel. Detaining now." Another pause longer, and in that pause, Mercer felt the particular tension of a situation that could go several different directions, depending entirely on what happened in the next 30 seconds at a gate 800 meters from where he was standing. "Then Colonel Captain Grant is sir. He's arguing that a sound, not a shot, something harder and shorter. The sound of physical contact, the specific noise that a confrontation makes when it stops being verbal." Then silence. Then a different voice, rougher, out of breath. "Southgate Post. Captain Grant has been detained. 1 soldier has a sir. He hit one of my guys. Grant hit Specialist Torres. Torres is down but conscious." Briggs closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. When he opened them, Mercer saw something he had not seen in 4 years of working for this man, the specific expression of someone who has just been forced to understand that a person they trusted completely was never who they believed. "Get medical to that gate," Briggs said. His voice was level, completely level, the kind of level that is achieved not by the absence of emotion, but by the decision to place emotion somewhere where it cannot interfere with the next required action. "And keep Grant restrained until I get there personally." "Yes, sir." He lowered the radio. Nobody said anything. In the silence, Vale made a sound that was not quite a laugh. It was the sound of a man acknowledging almost professionally that a contingency he had built into his planning had just failed. He was supposed to be clear by now, Vale said. Not to anyone specific, almost to himself. The timeline was off. Donovan looked at him. "Because the convoy reversed." Vale met her eyes. "Because the convoy reversed," he confirmed. There it was, the whole shape of it, visible now from the inside the choreography that Vale had designed, and Grant had enabled the false signals and the ambush in the casualty report that had been intended to pull Briggs's attention and forces north, while Grant used the chaos to walk out the south gate with the authentication credentials that would have made the 19% of Oracle's data that had transmitted actually usable. Without Grant's credentials, the partial transfer was fragments. Technically recoverable data, but without the authentication architecture. Grant carried it was a puzzle with no key. He was your exit package, Donovan said to Vale. He was the access layer, Vale said. The data means nothing without someone who can authenticate it into a live network. Grant was the only person in this installation with the right combination of clearances and system access to make it operational. And now he's at the south gate and zip ties, Mercer said. Vale looked at him without expression. Yes. Briggs set his radio on the equipment console. He turned to face Donovan fully, and the posture was not the posture of a colonel addressing a master sergeant. It was the posture of a man speaking to an equal, which for Nathaniel Briggs Mercer suspected was one of the more genuinely difficult physical adjustments he had made in a long career. I need to understand something, Briggs said. The operation, from the beginning. How long have you known about Grant? Donovan was quiet for a moment. We identified a potential insider 11 weeks ago, she said. The pattern of information leaks from 3 separate installations pointed to someone with access to a specific classification tier and a specific set of system credentials. Grant's profile emerged as a primary candidate 4 weeks ago. Briggs absorbed this. 4 weeks. Yes. You came here knowing he was the likely suspect. Knowing he was the likely suspect, she confirmed, not knowing definitively. There were 2 other candidates at 2 other installations. Sentinel-7 was running parallel operations at all 3. She paused. This one turned out to be the active site. Briggs looked at the floor for a moment, then back at her. Why didn't you just arrest him if you knew? Because arresting Grant without evidence of the active operation would have given Vale time to disappear, and Oracle would still be compromised with no recovery path. Her voice was patient but not gentle. She was explaining, not apologizing. We needed Vale active and in the facility. We needed the transfer attempt on record. We needed the full picture. She looked at him steadily. We needed you to run Iron Summit. That landed on Briggs visibly. You needed the exercise, he said slowly. Vale needed the exercise. He built his entire operation around Iron Summit's communications environment, the elevated network traffic, the multiple simultaneous frequencies, the volume of IFF signals that would make his phantom signatures blend in. Without Iron Summit, he had no cover for the intrusion. She let that sit for a moment. So yes, we needed the exercise to run. We needed it to look exactly like what it appeared to be. If it had been canceled or modified, Vale would have known something was wrong and disappeared again. Mercer watched Briggs's face work through the implications of what she was saying. He watched the colonel understand progressively and with visible effort that everything he had believed about this morning, that he was running a training exercise that an inconvenient woman from Washington was trying to disrupt, had been inverted. That the woman he had shoved out of a briefing room had needed the exercise to continue almost as much as Vale had. That his refusal to shut it down, which he had experienced at Command Authority, had in fact served the operation. I was part of your plan, Briggs said. Not accusing, not angry, just working it out. You were part of the operational environment, she said carefully. Which is different. Is it? She considered that. Your soldiers were never at serious risk of casualties. The hostile elements orders were to disrupt and divert, not to engage lethally. The ambush was designed to stall and redirect, not to destroy. She paused. I would not have allowed Iron Summit to proceed if I believed your people were in genuine lethal danger. But you weren't certain, he said. I was as certain as this kind of operation allows, she said, which is not the same as certain. That honesty cost her something. Mercer could see it, the admission that certainty had not been available, that she had operated in its absence. The way field operators always operated, by managing risk rather than eliminating it. And she offered it to Briggs without softening it because he deserved the unmodified truth and she knew it, and she gave it to him anyway. Briggs was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Torres is going to be all right. I know, she said. He looked at her. You don't know that. He's 23 years old and Grant hit him once. He'll be all right. She held Briggs's gaze. And when he is, I'd like you to tell him that the action he took today, holding that gate following procedure, when a superior officer was pushing him to bypass it, mattered. Tell him it was part of something real. Briggs looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded, slowly, once. Donovan turned back to the equipment console. The transfer log was still on screen, 81% hard. Stopped the moment the relay transmitter had come apart under her round. She studied the breakdown of what had transferred versus what had been stopped, her expression moving through calculations that Mercer could only partially follow. The 19% that's contained here, she said. I need your communications team to help me identify and isolate the specific data segments before we power down this equipment. The segments Vale's team selected first will be the highest priority intelligence targets. Understanding what they chose first tells us what they valued most. My team will be here in 10 minutes, Briggs said. Make it 7. He reached for his radio without hesitation. Mercer looked at that, the automatic, unquestioned compliance, and thought about 5:58 that morning, the briefing room. The folder cracked across the table, the way Briggs had looked at her like she was an inconvenience to be managed. He thought about the distance between that moment and this one, and marveled at how completely a morning could restructure a person's understanding of another person if the evidence was clear enough and they were honest enough to look at it. His radio crackled. Blake's voice in the controlled panic of earlier had been replaced by something more settled. The tone of a person who has been frightened and has come through it and is now running on the particular clarity that follows genuine crisis. Sergeant Mercer, the casualty report from the northern sector. The soldier down. I've been trying to get confirmation from the medical team. And, Mercer said, there is no casualty. The northern sector medics responded to the report and found nobody. The transmission was generated from a spoofed medical frequency. It was false from the start. Briggs heard it. His jaw tightened. Grant had generated a false casualty report to push Briggs into committing his forward elements in creating the window for his escape. He had used the colonel's instinct to protect his soldiers as a weapon against him. He had taken the thing Briggs cared most about, his people, their safety, and manufactured it into a lever. Where is Grant now? Donovan asked. Southgate Post, Briggs said. His voice was very flat and very controlled. Restrained. I want to talk to him before anyone else does. Briggs looked at her, a different kind of look than the ones that had preceded it. Not the look of a man assessing a subordinate or an equal, or even a superior. The look of a man who has been completely wrong about something and is still in the early stage of understanding how wrong, and is choosing to respond to that understanding with action rather than defensiveness. I'll take you there, he said. They left Vale in the facility under MP guard and walked the 800 meters to the south gate with Briggs on one side of Donovan and Mercer on the other. And the three of them moved through the installation in a configuration that would not have been imaginable at 5:58 that morning. Grant was sitting on the ground beside the gatepost, wrists secured behind him, his uniform disheveled from the struggle, his expression set in the composed, evacuated blankness of a person who has stopped running a scenario and is now simply waiting for what comes next. He looked up when they approached. His eyes moved to Donovan first, then to Briggs, then back to Donovan. Sentinel 7, he said. He said it the way Vale had said it, not as a question, as a confirmation. The confirmation of a person who had known the designation was operational in his area and had been hoping until this moment that the operation had not been as complete as it apparently was. Donovan crouched in front of him so their eyes were at the same level. Where was the authentication package going? She said. Grant said nothing. Grant. Her voice carried no threat, no heat. It was simply the voice of a person asking a necessary question and expecting an answer. Because the alternative, the question going unanswered, was genuinely not something she was prepared to accept. The partial transfer reached an external receiver. I need to know who's on the other end. Grant looked at her steadily. You know I'm not going to tell you that. I know you think you're not going to tell me that, she said. But you've been at this installation for 4 years. You know how this ends. Vale is in custody. Your extraction team is in custody. The transfer is stopped. Whatever this was supposed to accomplish, it didn't accomplish it. She held his eyes. The only variable left is what you give us voluntarily and what we have to find without you. One of those options is better for you than the other. You know that too. Grant looked at the ground. When he looked up, something in his expression had shifted. Not capitulation, that was not a word that applied to Wesley Grant even now, but something more complicated than defiance. Something that looked more than anything like a man trying to decide how much of what he believed was still worth protecting, now that the structure built around that belief had collapsed. You got lucky, he said, the convoy reversing. That wasn't in any projection. It wasn't luck, she said. He looked at her. The convoy reversed because I told it to reverse, she said. And it reversed when I told it to because Mercer trusted what I had shown him rather than what my paperwork said I was. She paused. You built your operation around the assumption that command hierarchy would function predictably, that the ranking officer would reject input from an unvetted outsider, that institutional reflex would override operational judgment. Another pause. Pause. You were almost right. Grant absorbed that. Almost, he said. Almost, she confirmed. Mercer watched this exchange and felt something he found difficult to categorize, the strange, uncomfortable sensation of watching a conversation between two people who were genuinely evaluating each other, finding in the other something that met their own professional standard in a situation where one of them was on the ground in zip ties because the other had been marginally better at the thing they both did. There was no satisfaction in Grant's expression. No hatred, no desperation, no performance of either dignity or defeat. Just the flat, stripped-down assessment of a professional who has lost and knows it and is deciding what to do with that knowledge. The receiver is in Vienna, he said finally. Commercial communications, front third-party cutout. You'll find it whether I tell you or not. It'll be faster if I do. Donovan nodded. Vienna, she repeated, and the word carried the weight of a coordinate being filed, processed, transmitted up through the operational structure toward people who would act on it within hours. She stood up. She looked at Briggs. Colonel, he's yours. Briggs looked at Grant for a long moment. The look of a man looking at someone he had known for 4 years, had trusted with operational authority, had relied on in situations that demanded complete confidence in another person's integrity. He said nothing to Grant. He simply looked at him, and then he turned away, and in that turning away was everything he chose not to say, which was more devastating than anything he could have spoken. 2 MPs came forward, and Grant was processed with the quiet efficiency of a military police element that had been given clear instructions and intended to follow them precisely. Mercer stood beside Donovan and watched. Vienna, he said quietly. Someone will be there tonight, she said equally quietly. The partial transfer doesn't become actionable without Grant's authentication layer. Whoever is waiting for it in Vienna is waiting for something that isn't coming. A pause, but we still need to be there. You're going to Vienna. She looked at him. Probably tomorrow. He let that sit for a moment. And Raven Rock. She looked at the gate, at the mountain beyond it, at the cold Colorado sky that had been lightening steadily since before sunrise, and was now fully bright in the way of high-altitude late mornings. Raven Rock goes back to Colonel Briggs, she said. It was always his installation. I was here for one reason, and the reason is finished. The reason is almost finished, he said, the 19%. The communications team will handle the data isolation. My involvement ends when the operational phase ends. She paused. Which is now. Mercer was quiet for a moment. Then he said, the shot on the relay, what was your actual hold? She looked at him. For a moment, he thought she was going to give him the same answer she'd given Vale she wasn't going to tell him. Then she said, 3 minutes of angle right, 7/10 mil elevation, held for the gust interval. Released at the second of the stable window. He ran it in his head. That's an aggressive release point. The transfer was at 79%. He nodded slowly. You didn't have time for the conservative window. I almost never have time for the conservative window, she said. There was something in the way she said it, not self-pity. Nothing like self-pity, but a kind of precise and honest acknowledgement of what her work actually looked like from the inside that made him understand more fully than he had understood it before, what it had cost her to be in that briefing room at 5:58 in the morning, watching a room full of officers look at her paperwork and see a weapons technician. Not because she needed them to see something more impressive, because she had known what was coming, and she had known she was the person equipped to handle it, and she had needed them to listen, and they had not, and she had gone out and handled it anyway, carrying the weight of a mission and the weight of their dismissal simultaneously, and she had not let the second thing contaminate the first. Briggs appeared beside them. My communications team is in the facility, he said. They've started on the data isolation. He looked at Donovan. There's something else. She waited. The soldier who was wounded in the northern sector, the engine block strike on the convoy lead vehicle, The crew chief took shrapnel from the secondary fragmentation. He paused. He's stable, but I need to know, was that a controlled risk you accepted? The question was not accusatory, it was honest. Donovan looked at him with equal honesty. The operational plan called for precision mechanical disruption, she said. Engine block, not crew. Vale's shooters were professionals operating under specific parameters. Secondary fragmentation was a risk I assessed as low probability. She held Briggs's gaze. Low probability is not zero probability. I accepted it as an operational variable. I was wrong to accept it without flagging it to you. A pause. That's in my report. Briggs was quiet. He's going to be all right, Briggs said. I know. You know because I had a medical team staged at the Northern Sector access point before Iron Summit began this morning, she said. Because I accepted secondary fragmentation as a low probability variable, and I prepared for it anyway. Briggs looked at her for a long moment. Then he said something that Mercer suspected cost him more than anything else he had said all day. I should have listened at 5:58, he said. You should have looked at the evidence at 5:58, she said. That's different. Is it? Yes, because if you had listened to me simply because I asked you to, you would have learned the wrong lesson. You need to listen to evidence. You need to create conditions where evidence can reach you regardless of where it comes from. She paused. That's what I'd want you to take from today. Not that you should have listened to me, that you should have had a system that let you evaluate what I was showing you instead of defaulting to who I appeared to be. Briggs looked at her for a long time. Then he said very quietly, you're right. 2 words, not padded with qualification or context or the soft language of partial concession. Just you're right. Mercer thought those might have been the 2 most difficult words Nathaniel Briggs had spoken in 25 years of command, and he thought Briggs probably knew that too, and he thought the fact that Briggs said them anyway was its own kind of data point about who Nathaniel Briggs actually was underneath the 25 years. His radio came alive. Blake's voice. Sergeant Mercer, the data isolation is running. Initial review of the transfer log shows Vale's team prioritized the Oracle targeting architecture files in the first transfer sequence. The authentication index, the geographic calibration layers, and the personnel identification protocols. A pause. The 19% that didn't transmit includes the integration key. Without the integration key, the targeting architecture is non-functional. Donovan closed her eyes, just for a second. When she opened them, she looked at Mercer, and he saw for the first time since 5:58 that morning, something that was not the controlled professional surface she had maintained through everything. Something underneath it, the particular quality of a person who has been holding something very heavy for a very long time and has just put it down. Not relief, more precise than relief, the specific sensation of a mission-critical objective achieved at the last survivable margin. The integration key, Mercer said. It's the piece that makes the rest usable, she said. Without it, what transmitted to Vienna is architecture without function. A weapon without a trigger mechanism. She paused. We got it. By 19%. By 19%. By a shot at 800 meters in variable wind through a scope she had settled for less than 30 seconds. By a convoy that reversed because Mercer had trusted a woman he had met 4 hours earlier. By a soldier at a gate who had followed procedure when a superior officer told him to set it aside. By a specialist who had flagged a timestamp discrepancy in a maintenance log because the math didn't add up. All of it. Every piece. The margin between Oracle intact and Oracle compromised had been built from a dozen small decisions made by people who had no idea they were making them. Donovan looked at Briggs. Your installation, Colonel, she said. He took the radio she offered. And for the first time that day, Nathaniel Briggs looked entirely like himself, not defensive, not challenged, not managing an authority. He felt slipping, just a commander standing on his installation, knowing what needed to be done next. He keyed the radio. All stations, this is Briggs. Stand down from emergency posture. Begin accountability formation. Medical teams maintain stations until all personnel are confirmed. A pause. Outstanding work today, all of you. Briggs out. He lowered the radio. He looked at Donovan one more time. How long do I have you, he asked. Until tonight, she said. And then she looked at the mountain. Vienna, she said. Vienna happened fast, and it happened quietly, and it happened the way things in Donovan's world always happened, without announcement, without visible drama, without any public record that anyone outside a very small compartmented circle would ever be permitted to read. She left Raven Rock at 1900 hours that evening, and in the same vehicle that had brought her, carrying the same bag she had arrived with, and the same black notebook. Book now considerably more filled than it had been at 5:58 that morning. Mercer walked her to the vehicle. Briggs came as well, which nobody had asked him to do, and which therefore meant more than if someone had. At the vehicle door, she stopped and turned. Briggs extended his hand. She took it. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then Briggs said, "The report, whatever you write, I want you to know, I understand if it reflects what happened this morning accurately." "It will reflect what happened accurately," she said. "That's what reports are for." "I know." He held her hand for a moment longer. "I also know that accurate doesn't always mean complete. There are things that could be in a report that don't need to be." She looked at him steadily. "And there are things that should be, regardless of whether it's comfortable." She paused. "But I write reports that are useful, Colonel, not reports that are punitive. There's a difference." He let go of her hand. She got into the vehicle. Mercer leaned on the window frame for a moment, the way people lean when they have something to say and haven't fully formed it yet. "The hold you gave me," he said, "on the relay shot, 3 minutes of angle 7/10 millisecond second of the stable window." "Yes. I'm going to put it in the training record, with context." She looked at him. "Which context?" "The context that explains why the shot had to be made at that window and not the conservative one. The context about 19%. He held her eyes. "Young snipers need to understand that the textbook window isn't always available. They need to know what it looks like to calculate a solution under real constraint." She was quiet for a moment. "Use it," she said, "but include the missed probability at that window." "Which was 11%, she said. "Absorb that. 11% chance the most consequential shot of the morning had failed. 11% margin between Oracle intact and a crisis of a magnitude that he was still, even now, only partially cleared to understand. 11%, he said. "Always tell them the missed probability," she said. "Confidence without that number is just arrogance." The vehicle moved. Mercer stood in the compound and watched it until the taillights disappeared through the main gate. And then he stood there a moment longer in the dark and the cold, and then he went back inside. Vienna resolved in 31 hours. Donovan's report to Special Operations Command documented the action, the capture, the partial transfer, the Vienna endpoint, and the subsequent interdiction of the cutout organization that had been positioned to receive and process the Oracle fragments. The interdiction team moved before the cutout's principals understood that the authentication layer they were waiting for was never arriving. 3 individuals were taken into custody in Vienna. 2 more were identified and flagged at border crossings within 48 hours. The integration key, the 19% that had not transmitted, went back into a secure facility under conditions that Donovan's report described in language, too classified for any version that would ever be summarized in a Pentagon review document. Oracle survived. Not intact, the architectural exposure required a complete review and partial redesign of the targeting system's authentication protocols. That work would take 8 months and cost more than anyone in the Appropriations Committee was comfortable being told about. But it survived. It remained American. It remained controlled. And the specific catastrophic scenario that Vail had been building toward, the one that had required Grant's 4 years of patient positioning and the precision choreography of Iron Summit's communications environment, that scenario closed without detonating. The margin was 19%. The margin was 11% missed probability on a shot at 800 meters in variable wind. The margin was a 23-year-old specialist named Blake, who noticed that a maintenance log timestamp was 35 minutes longer than the diagnostic tool's maximum runtime. The margin was a soldier at a gate named Taurus, who followed procedure when a superior officer told him to set it aside and got hit for it and held the gate anyway. Donovan included all of them in her report by name. She did not include everything. 6 weeks after Raven Rock, the Pentagon Review Panel convened in a conference room in the basement of a building whose address was not publicly associated with the Department of Defense, and Colonel Nathaniel Briggs sat at one end of a long table and answered questions for 4 hours. He was honest, completely uncomfortably. precisely honest about every decision he had made from 5:58 in the morning to the moment he had lowered his radio and said, "Outstanding work today," to an installation that had spent the previous 8 hours running what appeared to be a training exercise, while an actual classified counterintelligence operation executed itself around and through and despite his command. He did not minimize his refusals. He did not contextualize them with mitigating factors. He named them, described their consequences, and when the panel asked him what he would do differently, he did not give the diplomatic answer. He said, "I would have a different system for evaluating information that challenges my existing picture, not a lower standard, a fairer one. One that assesses the quality of the information rather than the rank of the person delivering it." He paused. "Sergeant Donovan told me at 5:58 in the morning that something was wrong. She was right. I told her she was outside her lane. I was wrong. That's the complete answer." The panel was quiet for a moment. One member, a brigadier general named Holloway, who had been taking notes steadily throughout the session, said, "Colonel Sergeant Donovan's report makes no recommendation regarding your command." Briggs said, "I know. Are you aware that she specifically declined to characterize your decisions as negligent?" "I'm aware." "Do you agree with her characterization?" Briggs thought about that for a moment, a real moment, not the performed consideration of someone managing a response. "I think she was more generous than she needed to be," he said. "And I think she was right that the problem wasn't my character. The problem was my system. A bad system can make a good person perform badly." He paused. "I intend to fix the system." Holloway looked at him for a moment. Then she wrote something in her notes. The review panel did not recommend disciplinary action against Briggs. Donovan's report had not recommended it either. But what her report did contain, and what the panel read carefully and discussed at length, was an analysis of the specific command conditions that had allowed a hostile operation to run for 4 years inside an active Army installation without detection. It was not an analysis of Briggs's failures. It was an analysis of structural conditions that could exist at any installation under any commander anywhere in the system. It was in the assessment of 3 different senior officers who read it the most useful document to emerge from the Oracle incident. More useful than the after-action report, more useful than the Grant prosecution file, more useful than the Vienna interdiction summary, because it named the mechanism rather than the individual. Briggs read it when it was cleared to his level 3 months after the review panel. He read it twice. Then he called his senior officers into the conference room at Raven Rock, and he talked to them for 2 hours, not about what had happened, and not about Donovan, and not about Oracle. He talked about information, about the conditions under which accurate information fails to reach the people who need it, about the difference between hierarchy as a tool of coordination and hierarchy as a filter that removes inconvenient data before it reaches the decision maker. He talked about a 17-second drone anomaly that his communications team had cleared in 3 hours, and a woman from a weapons evaluation office who had identified its significance in 12 minutes. He didn't explain why she had identified it faster. He didn't need to. "The question isn't whether she was smarter than my communications team," he said. "The question is whether I built conditions where someone with her information could reach me. I didn't. I built conditions where rank determined whose information mattered. And in those conditions, the most important thing anyone said to me all morning came from the lowest ranking person in the room." He looked around the table. "That is a command failure, and it's mine." Nobody spoke. Then a captain at the far end of the table said carefully, "Sir, what do you want us to do differently?" Briggs said, "I want you to make it possible for the lowest ranking person in any briefing room to say something that I will hear and evaluate on its merits. Not on their rank, on the merits." He paused. "I don't know exactly what that looks like yet, but we're going to figure it out, starting now." That was the first day of what eventually became a formal command protocol at Raven Rock, documented, trained, incorporated into officer education, that Briggs never gave a name because he felt that naming it would give it a bureaucratic weight that would make it easier to perform without practicing. Mercer helped him design it. It was not a complicated system. It was at its core a single principle: when information contradicts your existing picture, the rank of the source does not determine whether you examine it. The quality of the evidence does. Simple, obvious once stated, extraordinarily difficult to actually practice inside a hierarchy, built on the assumption that rank correlates with information quality. They built it anyway. 4 months after Raven Rock Donovan received the offer from Major General Shaw, she was sitting in a debrief room at a facility whose location this account is not authorized to specify, reviewing the final disposition documents from the Vienna interdiction when Shaw walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee and a folder which Donovan recognized immediately as a combination that preceded consequential conversations. Shaw set 1 cup in front of Donovan and sat down. "You know why I'm here," Shaw said. "I have a guess." "Command," Shaw said. "Larger Sentinel element. Full operational authority, standing mission set, dedicated assets." She opened the folder. "Everything you've been operating without for the last 3 years." Donovan looked at the folder without touching it. Shaw waited. "You're not going to look at it," Shaw said. "I'll look at it," Donovan said. "I'm thinking first." Shaw let her think. Outside the room, the facility hummed with its particular institutional energy, the quiet, pressurized hum of places where serious people do serious work in carefully controlled conditions and have learned to keep the weight of it from showing in their faces. Donovan had lived inside that hum for 11 years. She knew every frequency of it. "There's something else I want," she said. Shaw looked at her. "Instruction," Donovan said. "Formal, structured, a program I can build from the ground up attached to the field mission, so it's not purely academic. Advanced sniper and field judgment instruction for personnel who've completed Tier 2 selection but haven't reached operational deployment." Shaw was quiet for a moment. "You want to teach," she said. "I want to build something," Donovan said. "There's a difference. The command position doesn't preclude, it deprioritizes it," Donovan said. "I've seen what happens to teaching programs when the person running them has a full operational mission set. The program survives on borrowed time and borrowed attention. It becomes a credential, not a capability." She paused. "I want to build something that outlasts me." Shaw looked at her across the table, not as a general looking at a subordinate, as one woman who had spent her career inside a system that assessed people by their rank and their paperwork. Looking at another woman who had spent her career demonstrating that both of those metrics were incomplete. "The command offer stays on the table," Shaw said, "indefinitely." "I know," Donovan said, "thank you." "The instruction program," Shaw paused. "I can give you a framework, resources, a selection pipeline, but it has to interface with the operational mission set or the resourcing disappears in the first budget cycle." "I know how budgets work," Donovan said. "Then you know this needs to be both things," Shaw said. "Operational and instructional, not one or the other." Donovan looked at the coffee cup. Then she looked at Shaw. "Both things," she said. "Yes." Shaw closed the folder. "I'll have the authorization drafted by Friday," she said. She left the room and Donovan sat alone for a moment with both cups of coffee cooling on the table between the empty chairs. And she thought about a nervous young female trainee at a rifle range and what it meant to stand behind her and say again, just keep going, the target is still there. The program took 6 months to build from authorization to first class. Donovan built it the way she built everything, from the evidence, from what she had actually seen fail in the field, from the specific gaps that kept reappearing in the personnel she encountered across 11 years of operational work. Not from doctrine, not from existing frameworks that she could have imported and modified and called her own, from scratch. The curriculum had 3 components. The first was technical advanced marksmanship, environmental calculation equipment, maintenance at the field level rather than the depot level. The kind of hands-on knowledge that she had demonstrated on Mercer's range when she identified a stress fracture in a scope mount by holding the rifle for 8 seconds. The second was operational judgment under incomplete information decision-making frameworks for situations where the textbook answer was unavailable, the specific cognitive skills required to maintain clarity when the environment was actively trying to confuse you. The third was the one that took the longest to design because it was the hardest to teach and the most important. She called it institutional communication, which was a dry name for something that was actually about this: how to be the lowest ranking person in a room and still make the most critical piece of information reach the people who need it before the window closes. She'd been thinking about it since 5:58 on a cold Colorado morning. She had been thinking about every version of it she had encountered in 11 years. Every room she had walked into, carrying information that didn't match the picture, the ranking officers had already constructed every moment when the choice was between deferring to the established hierarchy and speaking clearly into the silence every time she had made that choice and lived with its consequences, regardless of which way it landed. She built a curriculum around those moments, around what they required, around the specific courage it takes to be right. When being right means contradicting someone with more rank, more history, more institutional weight than you and doing it anyway. Not with aggression, not with performance, but with evidence, clearly presented without apology. She taught the first class herself, 12 students. 8 weeks the first 3 weeks at a facility in the Appalachians that had no name. Anyone outside the program was authorized to know. She was harder on them than any instructor they had encountered before. And they discovered this not through cruelty, but through precision. She required them to be precise about what they knew, precise about what they didn't know, precise about the difference between those two things. And she returned that precision with complete honesty about everything she had gotten wrong in her own career. On the 5th day, a student, a young woman named Vasquez, 26, with 3 years of conventional service, and the kind of quiet intensity that Donovan recognized because she had seen it in her own mirror, asked a question that stopped the room. "When you were at Raven Rock," Vasquez said, "when Briggs kept refusing, when you knew and he wouldn't listen, was there a moment when you thought about just forcing it, going around him entirely, doing it without him?" The room was very quiet. Donovan looked at Vasquez for a long moment. "Yes," she said. Nobody had expected that answer. "There was a moment," she said, "when I calculated that I could execute the operation without Briggs's cooperation entirely. I had the authority. I had the mission mandate. I could have bypassed him, used the Gray 6 channel to direct his units directly, and removed him from the operational picture entirely." She paused. "It would have worked technically." "Why didn't you?" Vasquez asked. "Because I needed him," she said. "Not his permission, his knowledge. He knew that installation in ways I didn't. He knew his soldiers, their capabilities, their limits, the terrain they'd trained in, the relationships between units. All of that was irreplaceable, and it was his." She paused. "The mission required me to have authority over the outcome. It didn't require me to have authority over him. Those are different things. I needed him as a partner, not a subordinate, and I couldn't make him a partner by removing his agency." Vasquez absorbed this. "So you kept trying to convince him?" "I kept providing evidence," she said. "There's a difference. I wasn't trying to convince him I was right. I was trying to give him the information he needed to arrive at the right conclusion himself." She looked around the room. "People don't change their position because you're persuasive. They change it because the evidence becomes undeniable. Your job is to make the evidence undeniable, not to make yourself persuasive." She wrote it on the board behind her. Not persuasion, evidence. It stayed on the board for the remaining 5 weeks of that first class. Raven Rock came 8 months after the program launched. Briggs had requested it formally through official channels with a detailed training proposal and a budget allocation, and the kind of institutional thoroughness that Donovan recognized as the work of someone who had learned from experience that improvisation without preparation produces exactly the kind of gaps that hostile actors exploit. She arrived differently this time. No false paperwork, no manufactured cover identity, no weapons evaluation office, whose full name took up most of a cover email. She arrived wearing her actual insignia, her actual rank, with orders that said exactly what she was there to do. She walked onto the sniper range at Raven Rock on a Tuesday morning in early fall, and Mercer was waiting at the equipment table with 2 cups of coffee and an expression that was professional and warm, and carried underneath both of those things the particular quality of a person who has been part of something consequential and is still months later processing what that means. "Sergeant Donovan," he said. "Sergeant Mercer," she said. She took the coffee. They stood for a moment at the equipment table and looked out at the range at the 12 students who had arrived that morning and were standing in a loose formation near the firing line, young and attentive and carrying the specific energy of people who know they are about to be assessed by someone whose standard they don't yet fully understand. Donovan looked at them. She set her coffee down. She walked to the firing line. They came to attention. "Rest," she said. They relaxed. She looked at them for a moment without speaking, and in the silence she ran the same calculation she always ran when she faced a new group not assessing their physical capability or their technical foundation. Those things would show themselves quickly enough, assessing something harder to see, whether they were here for the credential or the capability, whether they understood the difference between a skill that made you impressive and a skill that made you useful. Some of you, she said, came here because you're good at this, because you qualified, you performed, you earned your spot by every metric the selection process measured. She paused. Good, that's the floor. That's where we start. It's not where we finish. Nobody spoke. The people who have come through this program and gone on to do something with it, she said, are not the ones who were the best shooters. They're the ones who understood that the rifle is the smallest part of what this work requires. She looked down the firing line. The rifle is a tool. Judgment is the skill. Knowing when to use the tool, when not to use it, and how to communicate what you know to the people around you when everything in the environment is working against that communication. That's what we're building here. She picked up the first rifle from the equipment table. She handed it to the student nearest her, a young man named Carver, 25, with steady hands and the careful posture of someone who had been well-trained technically. Show me your natural point of aim, she said. He settled behind the rifle. She watched him. Not the position, the thinking. The way he found the position, whether he was following a memorized checklist or actually reading his body's relationship to the target. You're compensating left, she said. He adjusted. Why did you compensate, she said. He looked up. Because you said. Why did you need to compensate? What was wrong before I told you? He thought about it. My elbow was, don't tell me. Feel it, then tell me. He reset. He was quiet for a moment, actually attending to his body rather than his memory of correct position. My left shoulder was rolled forward, he said. It was pulling my natural aim left. Yes, she said. Now you know. Fire. He fired. The round landed 2 inches left of center. Better, she said. Not because of the result, because you understood the cause before you corrected it. She moved to the next student. Understanding the cause is always the priority. Corrections that don't understand their cause don't hold. She moved down the firing line. She stopped at a young woman at the far end, Vasquez, who had come up from the first class to serve as an instructor's assistant for this rotation, and who was watching Donovan work the line with the focused attention of someone turning observation into knowledge. Donovan looked at her. What did you see? She said. Vasquez said, Carver understood his error faster than he would have if you'd corrected him directly. Why does that matter? Because in the field, you won't be there to correct him. Donovan nodded. Teach them to correct themselves, she said. Not to wait for correction. She paused. That's true on the firing line. It's true in a command post. It's true anywhere someone needs to make a decision without waiting for someone with more rank to tell them what to do. She looked at Vasquez steadily. The goal is not obedient soldiers. The goal is thinking soldiers. Obedient soldiers wait. Thinking soldiers act. Another pause. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes acting means speaking when everyone above you is telling you to be quiet. Vasquez held her gaze. Like 5:58 in the morning, Vasquez said. It was not a question, it was a reference, direct and deliberate, to something Vasquez had been told about, had processed, had made into a reference point for her own developing professional understanding. Donovan looked at her for a moment. Like 5:58 in the morning, she confirmed. She turned back to the firing line. Briggs was standing at the back of the range. She had known he was there. She had seen him arrive during the Carver correction, had tracked his position in her peripheral attention without redirecting her focus from the students. She had not acknowledged him, not because she was managing a dynamic, not because she was making a point, but because the students were the priority and everything else waited until the students were done. Now she was done with the first rotation. She walked back to the equipment table. Briggs came forward. He looked different from the man who had stood in the TOC at 5:58 and told her that hundreds of soldiers were already staged and the exercise would proceed. Not diminished, nothing about Briggs had diminished, and she would not have respected a version of him that had changed. The way things change when something real has moved through them. How are they? He asked, nodding toward the firing line. Early, she said, but honest. Carver learns from the inside out. That's good. She picked up her coffee. Your range has good light in the morning. We don't usually start this early. I do, she said. He almost smiled. Almost. The protocol, he said. The information protocol we've been building. I'd like your eyes on the current version before you leave, if you're willing. Send it to me tonight, she said. I'll have notes by morning. He nodded. Then he said something that she had not expected, which was rare enough that it registered as a genuine surprise. I told my officers about you, he said. Not the classified parts. The parts I'm allowed to tell. About the briefing room. About refusing to hear you. About being wrong. He paused. I told them in front of their subordinates. I wanted them to hear it from me about me before they heard any version of it from anyone else. She looked at him. That took something, she said. It took less than I expected, he said. Once I decided to do it, it was easier than I thought. He paused. I think the anticipation of being wrong in public is worse than actually being wrong in public. Once you say it clearly, people respect the honesty. They don't use it against you the way you think they will. She nodded slowly. Most people don't. The ones who do, he said, were never people you needed to protect your authority from anyway. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, you should teach that. I plan to, he said. She picked up the rifle from the equipment table and turned back to the firing line, where 12 students were waiting and the morning was clear and cold, and the targets were set, and everything that needed to be done was simple and clear, and completely within the capacity of the people assembled to do it. She thought for a moment about Vienna, about the integration key, about the 19% that had not transmitted, and the 11% missed probability, and the 4 seconds of stable win that had made the difference between a world where Oracle remained American and a world where it didn't. She thought about Blake's timestamp, Torres and his gate, a convoy that reversed because one person trusted what he had seen over what the paperwork said. She thought about all of the margins. Then she stopped thinking about it, because the students were waiting, and there was work to do. She walked back to the firing line and stood behind the first student and watched his position and found the error and did not name it. What do you feel, she said. He attended to it. He found it himself. He fired. Closer. Again, she said, because that was the work. Not the shot that ended an operation, or the shot that saved 19% of a classified targeting system, or the shot that demonstrated something to a room full of officers who had already decided what she was. The next shot, always the next shot. Always the work of making the person beside you more capable of finding their own errors, correcting their own aim, and speaking clearly into whatever silence tries to keep the most important information from reaching the people who need it most. That was the work. And Claire Donovan had never once waited for permission to do it. That was her true identity, not the classified designation, not the field authority that superseded a colonel's command, not the 11-year operational record that existed in files almost nobody was cleared to open. It was this, a soldier who understood that real authority is never given by rank or paperwork or title. It is built shot by shot, decision by decision, in the space between what you are told you are and what you actually do. And no one, no colonel, no dismissal, no room full of officers who have already made up their minds can take that from you.